Hello there, I hope you're doing well. My name is Marc Gallagher. I am a ukulele player from England and I love going to ukulele festivals, and I'm very lucky that I have been invited to ukulele festivals and have played in 12 different countries. I'm absolutely so fortunate that I get to do that. However, one thing I do notice when I go to ukulele festivals is that oftentimes the cases look very homogenous. In the same way that when you go on holiday, you will get something distinctive for your luggage, something distinguishing like stickers or badges, ways to know that it's your bag and you don't pick up the wrong thing. Yet, we don't see that too commonly with ukulele cases. I've heard of many horror stories of people putting a ukulele case down in amongst the sea of black shells and Fusion gig bags and then picking up the wrong thing. And I never want something like that to happen for me, which is why I like to stand out a little bit. In 2019, I got hold of this ukulele case from Ohana. It is a wooden shell with a lime green alligator skin style Tolex wrapped around it. I got this from the Mims Uke stall in 2019 at Kentucky Ukulele Festival, and I love this case in terms of how distinctive it is, especially when I go to ukulele festivals. In the 6 years since I bought this case, I've only seen one. And as much as I love this case and how distinctive this is, blue is kind of my branding. If you take a look at my suits, my instruments, my set dressing and studio acoustic panels, you can tell that I'm very blue, dabba-dee, dabba-die, dabba-dee, dabba-die. As a result, I've been on the recent hunt for a dark blue ukulele case. My first port of call was taking a look at Ohana, seeing if they had any more of these alligator shell cases in a suitable finish. Unfortunately, these cases have been discontinued, and the only other colour that I could really find that appealed to me was this bright yellow one, which I have never been able to get my hands on. Taking a look for any other like blue ukulele cases often leads itself to Etsy custom makers of like soft cases and fabric stuff, and I needed something that was a hard shell. The closest I managed to come was looking at cross-stroke ukulele cases. They had this deluxe model in a carbon fiber style material, and they had a beautiful dark blue finish. Unfortunately, that dark blue finish only came on their soprano cases and their baritone cases, not on tenor, which is what I predominantly play. Why they don't have any dark blue tenor, I have no idea. It's really annoying, and I've emailed them and they've not gotten back to me. The only other option was to really get like a custom-made ukulele case by Calton, but one look at those prices and yikes, like absolutely not. I could not justify that much for a case that cost more than the instrument I would be housing it in. So then my next thought was to get an existing ukulele case and customize it, make it my own with my own blue finish. I ended up picking up this ukulele case from Back Alley Music in mold. So this is a TGI hard case. It is a wooden shell and it's got this soft tweed style material on the outside that's stuck to the shell. And it's also got this nice little leatherette strips around it and on the handle, which is a really nice touch. My plan was to go to furniture upholsterers to see if I could get them to just remove the fabric on the shell and then just stick on a dark blue fabric and go from there. That was my plan. However, most of these furniture upholsterers were a bit like, this is something we can't do. And then one person did give me a quote of like £250, and that's about 5 times as much as I spent on this case. Finding myself at another impasse, I decided to go down the painting route. This is a relatively soft fabric. I don't know exactly what fabric is. It's not tweed actually, it's probably some kind of synthetic, but I consulted with my friend Sam Lyon to decipher what kind of paints would be suitable. I'd seen this emulsion paint for walls in an electric blue finish, which I thought was absolutely perfect. However, due to its practicalities on fabric and how likely it'd be to wash off, Sam had found and suggested this Hobbycraft fabric paint in this ultramarine blue, and it's cheap and cheerful for this kind of project. So I ended up getting a couple of bottles of these. Will it be enough? I have no idea. Happy to go and get more. Now with all of that sorted, I'm going to take the ukulele case and the requisite paints to Sam Lyon. She has brushes, knowledge and experience, all of things which I completely lack in this field, so I'm really glad that she has agreed to take on this project. I'm happy to check in with her now to see how that case customization is going along.
I was daunted at the prospect of painting the ukulele case because it had a woven fabric exterior that had already been nicely upholstered. Painting on fabric is tricky, so we've gone for a specialist fabric paint, and Marc picked this striking ultramarine shade of blue. I didn't know if there was a waterproof sealant on the case that might have interfered with the paint, so we got some white primer as a first layer, then the paint, and then varnish as a final protective layer if needed. The primer gives something for the paint to cling onto, as the textured fabric top might be a bit visible underneath if it was just covered with the paint. I was worried the paint might be blotchy or patchy if applied on its own without a base layer. As a result, the primer fits into the grain of the fabric, giving a more flattened surface to paint on. Honestly, it was a little scary doing those first brush strokes. I've never done something like this before and I really didn't want to muck it up. The front and back were easy enough to paint, the sides were much trickier. Marc wanted me to leave the leather and hardware as is, so I had to be very careful with my brush strokes. I then had to use a finer brush to fill in the gaps at the edges. This took a lot of energy due to the sheer concentration needed. After a couple of days, I realised I could use masking tape to protect the leather, and I can't believe I didn't do this to begin with. On some of the days it was 30 degrees, a nightmare to do the painting, but it made the drying easier. I left the primer to dry for several hours before tackling the back. Although admittedly, I say several hours, it ended up being several days because I have a baby and trying to do anything with a baby is impossible. So after a couple of coats of primer and a couple of days, once the primer had dried, I polished the brass hardware like the studs and brackets to remove any paint that I accidentally got on them. I just used cotton balls and soapy water, and for the little screws I had to use a small cotton bud to get them back to their previous shine. I know I'll have to do this again once I've painted the blue, but I hope to be more careful there. When it came to the blue paint, the bottles were much smaller, so instead of putting it in a bowl and wasting the remnants, I applied it directly to the case to make the absolute most of what little paint I had. When I first opened the paint, it splattered all over my dining room table. Oh, how we suffer for our art. The vibrant shade of blue really pops. I honestly think it's because of the white primer layer underneath. That really helped the blue to not just sink into the grain of the fabric. After the first layer of blue on the top, I knew I needed to do one or two more because it was a little bit patchy. To be fair, we were working with just a couple of tiny bottles of paint, but I think I'll need more to do the whole case. Once again, the edges around the brass needed a delicate hand, but honestly, this kind of detailed painting wasn't as difficult as getting the flipping camera to focus. The masking tape was a godsend by the time I started to paint the blue on the sides. Once the first coat was applied on the top and bottom, you could see the direction of the brush strokes, which I didn't want. It looked really obvious in certain lights. The sides weren't too bad, but for the top and bottom, I thought it would benefit from using a mini roller for the second coat to give a more even spread. When using the roller, I painted in pretty much all directions, unlike the unidirectional strokes of my paintbrush. I think by rolling in all directions it gives an even spread and further takes away from that light streak effect on the first layer. I really didn't want Marc to buy more paint than he needed, and the roller helped maximise the paint usage, but there were times during the second coat where I thought it could do with a third. 2 bottles in, I realised we could do with just one more bottle. I needed a second coat on the bottom, maybe another one on the top, and a bit of love to the sides. But it honestly looked great so far for 2 small bottles of paint. I left it to dry for several hours because it stayed quite tacky. I don't know if that's the nature of the paint or whether that's because it was 30 degrees outside, but honestly, leaving it to dry for several hours really wasn't an issue because I had a 7-month-old demanding my attention anyway. So after all the layers of the blue were applied and left to dry, I noticed it was still a little bit tacky to the touch, so I needed something to complete its feel. After a lot of research, I decided on this Liquitex matte varnish. It's designed for fabric and reviews said it had good durability. The varnish was a bit runny, so I put it in a bowl before brushing on with broad strokes. I picked a matte finish due to it being a bit more flattering to the previously upholstered case rather than the glossy shine that a lot of other varnishes deliver. The plan was for it to complement and match the kind of finish of the paint underneath it. I haven't used that varnish before, so this was quite a daunting part. I didn't know how much to use or if it needed a second coat, but the entire project was a little bit wing it, so I just trusted my instincts. The varnish on the top looked and felt amazing after it dried. I did a second coat for extra protection because being that it was an instrument case and it was likely going to get knocked and bashed around a little bit at gigs, I figured the case needed all the protection it could get. And I'm glad I did, because not only did it look and feel really smooth, but it also had such good durability as I was moving it around. When removing the masking tape, some of the tape clung on for dear life at the edges of the leather because the varnish had wedged it in. My carving tools didn't cut through the varnish, which does tell me that the varnish is good, so there is that. But I had to use a Stanley knife and tweezers to remove the final bits of tape before some final touch-ups. These touch-ups are the tiniest bits of detailing on the edges and filling in any white primer areas that I'd missed because of the tape. But you know we're on the home straight. Once the final paint detailing was done, I had to use this fine carving tool to scrape away any blue paint on the gold hardware, whilst also not damaging the gold. Unfortunately, the cotton buds and soapy water didn't quite cut through the varnish that had gone on top of the blue paint on the hardware, so it needed to be scraped. The scraping of the paint and varnish was easily the most tedious and time-consuming part of the whole process. It took several hours due to the varnish being so stubborn and hard-wearing. I'm not sure what I could have put on the studs to protect them, but I'm sure there was probably something that I hadn't thought of. After the scraping, it's just another little polish of the studs for that shine. Finally, I added a last bit of varnish to the finer areas that I'd repainted after peeling the tape off, just to add an extra bit of protection. And I topped up a couple of the spots on the top, just to keep it even, and then it was over! Mercifully, it was over.
Oh my god, this is amazing. Sam has done such a great job on the painting of this. This is something that neither of us have that much experience with, but it was an idea and we realised it and it looks great. It feels great, really does feel great with having that like lacquer on the top, that varnish. It's beautiful and it looks stunning. Like, this shade of blue is beautiful. Dark blue is my branding, and to have a case now that is very me, I love that so much. I can't wait to go to ukulele festivals with this case and my ukulele proudly displayed in a case that is very me. The ultramarine is beautiful. In some lights it looks a bit purple, but it's just a really stunning, vibrant shade. If I was to maybe readdress a couple of things, one thing I was thinking about during the process was getting like my M logo and having that painted in black, say here. I think that might be a really nice touch. Also, the brown leather, we kept the leather as is. However, I imagine if that was in black, that would be really, really nice to look at. Okay, so here's one comical, like, human error oversight thing, which I think is quite funny. I was having a bit of a hard time actually opening the case when I took it home, and the reason why was because when Sam was applying the primer, the paint, and then the varnish, the case was closed the entire time, and she got like right in the details here. So it had set, and basically the case got stuck to itself. And what that meant was that I had to take a little nail scissor and just kind of run it around just to like, you know, open the case, and voila. But what that's meant is that because Sam basically forgot about the inside, we now have like just a little bit of the interior, which you can see where the paint used to be. Sam's very kindly said, Mark, bring this over next time and I'll fix it, and leave the case open for it all to dry. But honestly, I don't mind as much because the exterior is perfect. The exterior is absolutely what I wanted out of this ukulele case, and it is so me. Sam let me keep the tools, the primer, the paint, the varnish, so that if I needed to, I could touch any of this up later on, because already I've only had this like for one day, and it's got its first ding just here where it kind of fell on a mic stand in transit. And to be honest, I'm fully embracing and accepting of these dings, because that is what this is. It is a ukulele case, and its job is to go to a bunch of gigs and be thrown around, and most importantly, to protect my ukulele. So it needs to take the dings so that my uke doesn't. And I don't mind the existence of this. Maybe in a bit of time, if there's enough that comes up, I might touch the paint up, but honestly, I'm really fine with this. But to conclude, I am thrilled with this result. Now we have a totally unique ukulele case. And I'm not using unique in like the sense of like it's a spectrum, how some people misuse the word as this is very unique. I mean unique like one of a kind. There is no other ukulele case like this right now. And that's great because it means I can go to ukulele festivals and I can have this that, yes, it is very me, and it represents me and my branding and everything like that. But also, I know 100% this is mine. This blue case with the beautiful brown leather trimming and the gold hardware, this is my ukulele, and I am so thrilled. This is an amazing project, and honestly, I think that other companies like Crossrock and TGI and other cases, they should start to have this kind of case in, because it's amazing. I can't thank Sam enough for all the wonderful work that she's done. I'm not going to necessarily say, hey, send all your cases to her. I don't think like she necessarily wants to have a load of work like that as a mother, but I really appreciate that she took the time and we had this idea, and with her guidance, we're able to execute this vision, and I'm so proud and so happy with the work that we've done. And maybe for you, if you have a ukulele case or a guitar case or a whatever, and you want to make it your own, hopefully this video can inspire you to do so and give you, at the very least, some sort of a primer, a tip on how to get started with it. That may be using fabric paint, that might be through other means, but hopefully this inspires you to make your case unique so that we can all go to festivals and we're not just carrying the same black cases, and things can look a bit more interesting and diverse and unique. And I think that's really wonderful. That's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you so much to my Patreon supporters for supporting the things that I do. You can also support me by going to patreon.com/Marc Gallagher Music and leaving a pledge from as little as, I think, a couple of pounds. Thank you so much for this. My name is Marc Gallagher, and you can follow me on your favorite social media at Marc Gallagher Music, where you'll see me and this brand new ukulele case at the various gigs I go to. But for now, I am Marc Gallagher. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you want, share if you feel compelled to, and follow me on places. I'll catch you down the road.